Timing, Josh.
Okay, it's recording now, so you are ready to start whenever you're ready.
Terrific. Well, welcome everybody. My name is Juliet Giglio. I teach screenwriting. I'm the program director for creative writing as part of the English and creative writing department. And I'm going to be talking today about how to make a screenplay PDF digitally accessible. And this is something that anyone who shares screenplays will have to start dealing with actually now and also very soon because as of next April, it will be a federal law that anything you share digitally will have to be digitally accessible. And this is a difficult thing with screenplays because in order to share them, they have to be PDFs. They are written on different types of screenplay formats, different programs, and unless you own that particular program, you won't be able to read it unless it's created as a PDF. So that's kind of the problem. But let's go in quickly and talk about some tools that I've created. One last thing I should mention is I am a fellow, a digital accessibility fellow, which is why I've been getting so involved in this topic. So, first off, I will say option one is let's go the easiest route possible. That is human nature. Don't try to make this difficult. So, if you remember the expression, give a man a fish, he eats for a day, teach a man to fish, he eats forever. So, I think that's kind of ties in with this topic here because instead of giving the students the screenplays you want them to read, and by giving, I mean like emailing them, teach them how to find them online because this will help them in the future when they're no longer in your classroom. In the future, when they're trying to find a particular script. And this way, they're not always bothering you for it. So it sounds simple, but honestly, I think this is a really good way to do it. And I'm currently teaching an online summer course. It's intermediate screenwriting. And in fact, I thought, well, I could just give them the script I wanted them to read, which is Get Out, or I'm not saying Get Out, I mean the screenplay Get Out, or I could say, hey, you need to figure out how to find it yourself. And I will tell them this, I say, put the script title into Google search, put in the title, put in PDF, and boom, that you will see different ways to find the script. Now, does this mean that they can find every screenplay online by themselves? No. Some of the big Marvel scripts are not on there, but typically if a script has been nominated for best screenplay and either the Academy or the Writers Guild, chances are you can find a link. Another great website that has links to screenplays. It's right here. It's called Go Into the Story Screenplay. And I can also share this PowerPoint with you afterwards, and then the hyperlinks will work for you. But I know the guy who runs this, Scott Myers. He's terrific. He's compiled this wealth of different blog posts over the years and also has this like great bank of screenplays. So that's like I think one of the better ways to make things digitally accessible, get them to find it themselves. Option number two, let's go to option number two. Oh yeah, and here's another thing. BlueCatScreenplay.com, they posted a nice link to all the screenplays from 2026 that were nominated, including Marty Supreme, which is very fun to read. And it was also just an accident, not so fun to read, but good movie. So again, there's many great sites already out there where you can easily find a script. Option number two is have the script read to you because that makes it, for students, it makes it automatically accessible. And I've actually done this with, we'll get there in a minute. But first, let's talk about how to do this. So this is the free version. You would download the script to the desktop, open it on the desktop, and then holding down the keyboard buttons that say right click and control, you will be given several options, and one of them will say open in reading mode, and you simply press play. So that's a free version. There are some paid versions, and this is what I have done, in fact. There are two paid programs that convert text to speech. My favorite is Speechify. It is a 7-day trial. So what I do is I use it, and so I can confirm that it works. I use it, and then I make sure to cancel it before the trial is up. So that one I like a lot. So let's say you're driving your car, you've got a long commute, you want to listen to some student screenplays, or you want them to listen to screenplays. It's a great way to do that. Another program is a Cost.io. This also has a free trial, and this one also looks pretty good. So in terms of making these digitally accessible for students, that's a great way to do it. I did have a blind student in my class a year ago. Actually, I've had two so far, and they've used these programs. All right, so that's option number two. Let's get down though into the nitty gritty. So the third way is making it accessible in Adobe. And I think, Laura, I think you've done this, haven't you? Laura, have you done it? Have you made it digitally accessible?
I've tried.
You tried,
It's
yeah.
yeah,
Josh,
it's
have you tried to do it in Adobe? Has it been successful for you? Yeah,
It's
so
hit and
I
miss. Sometimes it works.
Right. And so I
right.
thought I've got to figure this out. And so I met with Rebecca Mushter and together we came up with this way to do it. And I'm a visual learner. And so I thought in sharing this, I wouldn't just talk at you and make this list for you. I would try to show it to you specifically the way it works in a step-by-step instruction. So first you're going to open up, first you search the script. And I did this for Sinners because that's a great script. And I opened it up and then you click download and then I save the script to the desktop. And this is what it looks like. Here's my little, I'm circling it right now with my little you know, queue here. It says sinners.pdf. Then holding the cursor over the icon, and this is where I kept getting stumped because I would be trying to hold it over another way of looking at the script. Once I've opened it, I would try to hold it over. It didn't work. But I would hold it over this icon and I would hold down the control key and right click because I'm on an iPad. I don't have a mouse anymore, and that's how I would do it. So once I've done that, and again, I wanted to show you the most minutia possible, then I would click open with. And up here at the top of this screen here, you see right below open, it says open with. And that's where I got to Adobe Acrobat. And you can see that up here at the top. Again, this was my first time doing this. I feel like I am the most Luddite person around. I am not a technical person. So I'm hoping that if I can do it, it will make it easier for other people. So then once I've hit open with Adobe Acrobat, the next steps are this. Then I click on View More and I scroll all the way to the bottom to get to View More. And then once I've clicked on View More, step number two is this. At the bottom of that column, I click on Prepare for Accessibility. And this is where I got kind of excited because I'm like, yes, this is going to work. Now all I need to do is the step three is click on automatically tag PDF. And you would think at this point that this was going to make it all accessible and the problem is solved. You can probably guess what happens next. Let's see. And here's how it looks in Adobe, right? So I've clicked on down here on the bottom. Let's see, I wanted to show you this. Prepare. Okay. So if you scroll down at the top, it says compress a PDF, and I scroll down about 8 spots. It says prepare for accessibility. That's right where you want to do it. Then up here at the top, it says automatically tag PDF, right? And that's when I got super excited. And this is what my page looks like. This is what they come up with. And some of it could be right, but chances are it's not. And so there's something called a P tag. And I'm not a coder. I'm a visual person. I write movies, I write books. I don't P tag stuff, but I learned how to do it. And this is how they made it look digitally accessible. So this is the first full page. Okay. And at the top, well, it's a little hard to read here. It'll be easier when you go and when you're able to zoom in a little more. But you can see how they're using H2. And so I think I did start to tag this actually, because H1 in the P tag is going to be reserved for the title. H2 is the key. H2 are all the scene headings. To make a script digitally accessible, all, and I'm saying all you loosely, all you really have to do is to make every scene heading accessible so that someone could jump around in the screenplay and go scene to scene. And so you're going to have to tag every scene heading in a 120 page script as H2. And everything else is pretty much going to be just a P tag. The only third thing is, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. Here's the first page. All right. So anyway, there's more you need to do. You've got to fix the headings, and that's where it gets time consuming. Sorry, I'm apologizing. So this is what you want to do. You will, in that document you're in, you'll scroll to the top of the script and you're going to change the P tags. So, but you don't have to change all of them. You only have to change the following three. The title of the script is going to go to H1. All the scene headings like exterior house, interior house, whatever, will become H2. And anything that's a transition like cut to is going to be H3. Everything else can stay as a P tag. So this is the part where someone suggested to me, oh, we could get the students to do this. Maybe this is a job for a TA to go through the screenplay and to tag it so that every scene heading is H2 and every transition is H3 and everything else would stay P. Anyway, and here I go again with coding everything else, anything that's not a title of it. Like I said, scene heading or transition um, is just a simple P. And that, so that's going to include, oh, let's go back. That's going to include character and also dialogue and action. All right. So let's move ahead because I think there's some other tools. So that's making a professional screenplay digitally accessible. Either option one was to tell them to find it themselves. Option two is show them how to make it so that it can be read to them. And option three is that coding stuff within Adobe. But then we still have the issue of what do you want to do if in Brightspace you want to share sample scripts that were written by previous students that highlight, what you want the assignment to look like. And this is something I like to do a lot. So what do you do about taking those scripts? Well, if it's written in the past and it's already a PDF, you're probably going to have to go through and code it the way I just showed you via Adobe. But there's got to be an easier way when current students are writing the scripts and maybe you want to start to use samples from current students. So first I called up Final Draft and honestly was not impressed with them. I met with their rep and they were kind of clueless about it. All they really wanted to do was push more sales of their screenplay program. But through my own little research, I did learn that Final Draft has a searchable text, which can be exported as a PDF. And I'm like, okay, but after the students use a free version of Final Draft, then it gets expensive. So maybe that's not that helpful in upper division classes. And Josh, probably everyone that comes to you, chances are has already used a free version of Final Draft. So that's a moot point. And Laura, you're teaching a lot of intro classes, and so I know that this is something we're going to discuss. We may steer away from Final Draft because I think there's a better solution. And it's ding ding, here it is. It's Writer Duet. So then I called up Writer Duet and I met with them for over a half an hour, and it was someone who was very helpful. And unlike Final Draft, Duet is actually a cloud-based system, meaning that it can be accessed from anywhere, which could be super helpful for us when we want to show examples of student work or show our own work in the classroom using the desktop computers, because then we could open it up and use a cloud-based software. And Writer Duet has a function that's already in it. If you stay in Writer Duet and don't save it as a PDF, that Writer Duet can be made digitally accessible by using the cards feature. And I'm guessing some of you have already used this. So this is the cards feature. So this is actually one of my own screenplays. And over here, I've opened it in Writer Duet. here's the script. On the left-hand side, you can see where it says right below project, I click on cards. And you can see the one that's highlighted says the third floor. There it is, the third floor. Meet Matthew, musician. I can easily jump around via the screenplay to different scenes, just like I can do in Adobe by tagging it, right? All the scene headings H2. And this could be a much easier way to do it with student screenplays. So let's say a student writes a great script. Next semester, you want to use it as a sample. Rather than having them change it into a PDF, you keep it in the dot writer duet format. And if all the students in the class are using writer duet, they can easily open it. It's already digitally accessible for not only them and you. And also a further benefit of using writer duet is you can add in your notes more easily using the comments function right here. Rather than going to all the trouble of going into Adobe and going into a PDF and making comments, this is a lot easier. It's almost like putting comments into a Google Doc. You know, when you have someone who's making an outline in Google Docs and you want to give them notes in the script outline. So that's another big plug for Writer Duet. Having said all this, though, once Writer Duet's been saved as a PDF, it's no longer accessible, and then we have the same problem. So one thing we can consider then is if we migrate all our students to Writer Duet, which honestly to me is a better program. It's what I use professionally. It's becoming more of the industry standard. It's free with the educator, but with a better version with the educator's discount, it's $2 a month for a subscription. And that's because chances are we'll have more than 60 students using it across all of our classes, and then they take 80% off and it becomes $2 a month. It would also help us. We could be using it as well. We don't have to deal with Writer Duet. We don't have to constantly update our software, and then all the scripts would be accessible. So, having said that, I have some final thoughts that this is not an easy process of making screenplays digitally accessible. And I think that we, all the screenwriting professors, should consider collaborating. And what I suggest is once I've finished tagging my the Sinners screenplay and making it digitally accessible, I should share it with you, Laura, with you, Josh, with everyone else, Soma, Mike, everyone else who teaches screenplay writing, including Francisco in broadcast. And we could start to create this script bank of digitally accessible screenplays so that we wouldn't have to keep reinventing the wheel. Yeah, because I said each time we go through that process, we share it with anyone in creative writing, CSS, or broadcast. And I think that's my final thoughts. I want to thank Jinyan Gu, Rebecca Mushter, and Emily Polikoff at Writer Duet. So now I have a few minutes for time for questions. I'm going to stop sharing here. Do you all have any questions? Hey, Mike, I didn't know you were here. I'm sorry. I would have said hello.
I'm here.
And do you all have any questions?
Look how big my face is up on the.
I know I was focused on looking at the slideshow and I saw only Josh and Laura. No, but do you all have any questions? Because when I first got involved in this process of figuring out how to make screenplays digitally accessible, honestly, it seemed horrible. And the more time I've spent with it, I think it's doable, especially if we all kind of collaborate and also if we consider moving over to using a different software. And if we're all in sync on Writer Duet, I think that might work.
Ready to do that
Josh,
sounds great, really.
yeah, honestly,
If
and
we're
Mike,
all in
you,
that and it's something we just have and are part of
yeah.
and can kind
And
of,
they have to use it anyway once they get to intermediate because
yeah.
they've already exhausted the free, 22-week version of of
Would
Final
they
Draft.
have to join too? Would they join or is Rare
Well,
Duet
so
free
it
for
would be
them
a
or
people could get a free version, but to really maximize it,
those sometimes run out?
they would get the $2 a month version, and then once the class is over, they could cancel it. So it would be like $6. Um,
Can they save would they have like a bank of their stuff would be saved there for them too?
yeah, they could save it. Yeah.
Like it would be a place they could keep
Well,
all
well,
their
well,
stuff.
interesting point. They would probably need to save it as a they would need to save it as a PDF to truly save it. Otherwise, they would stay on there. Otherwise, they would contemplate what I'm actually thinking of doing, which is getting a lifetime version. And with the educator's discount, it's a lot of money, but over time, I think it's like $200, but it might be less for students. Now, I know, Josh, some of your students use, what's the other
We
software
use
they use?
Studio Binder.
Yeah, Studio Binder. And how much is Studio Binder?
It's free.
Forever?
Yeah.
Okay. And does it have
There's a
this?
script limit to it, but yeah.
Right. So that's Writer Duet has a script limit of
That's why I
three.
felt like students were running into the script limit with some of the, because they were
Right.
doing a lot of different things and then all of a sudden they were done, you know?
Right. Which it does have the script limit. You're right. The three and Studio Binder, how many scripts can they have? What's that limit?
I Off the top of my head, I think it's two or three at one time.
Yeah.
But they can recycle those and
They
delete
can
them from
keep,
there.
yeah, deleting them out. So that's another
Um,
option. And they have the
how do you get
cards.
around the charging the students money?
Well, they do it and well, Jake Dodd does it in his class, right? He charges the
No.
money for um
Well, we have course fees for equipment.
right, so you would make it as a course fee maybe. Oh, I see, but then the school has to pay for it.
Right.
Right.
Well, their tuition goes into the course fees, right? Um,
Well, you could look at it,
you could talk to see if you could put this through as like a, I don't know, as like a textbook.
yes, I was going to say I would view it
Um,
like a textbook and say it's $2 a month, and if they could see what they're getting for that for the cost of $6 for the course of the semester, 3 months, I
yeah,
think it's
I would talk to someone, or even just your dean, just to kind of run it by them to see what they think the best option is.
okay.
There's also are you gonna put this in labs, on computers in labs?
Well, we don't really have labs, not in
Well, the
creative
school
writing.
does. School has
The
labs
school
all over the
does.
place.
So that's an interesting idea. If the school had a version, I don't know if it would work because I think the way the license is set up is each writer duet is set for each person. So I don't think that would work in the same way. That
Right.
would, yeah, maybe work better in Final Draft. Now in Studio Binder, do they have the cards function?
I believe yeah, I think it has all the same functions.
Okay.
Um, I
Is it
push my students to buy on their own, but I don't make them. I
mhm.
have them look at Final Draft and Studio Binder because Studio Binder has great pre-production
True.
paperwork options as
You're
well.
Yeah, you know what? Your needs are slightly different. You're absolutely right for
Um,
filming.
I know the school has the Adobe Creative Suite. Is the Does Adobe still have screenwriting software in there? There used to be one.
I don't believe so. I
There
don't know
used
that
to
I'd
be
want
one
to
in
use
there.
I don't know that I'd want to use it either, frankly. Um,
I'm just thinking because it's free and it would be on
mhm.
any of the
And it
campus
might
computers.
be. You know,
Um,
what, I'll make a note of that and I'll look into that. Um,
I've never used it, so I don't know how good it is. But I don't even know if it's still there. They might have taken it out if it wasn't that popular.
right. I mean, I think Final Draft also has the cards. But I
Hmm.
think what's
It
really
does.
nice is in terms of sharing the screenplays, if you're sharing them in your Brightspace in your classes, if you could share them as a dot, WDX writer duet, that then anyone could open it. And if everyone's using that, they could open it. And that would make it accessible because then they would see the cards on the left-hand side.
Right.
So look, there's a lot of ways to kind of to look at this, and it's just trying to figure out what's the simplest way moving forward. And I think Writer Duet Final Draft is so expensive. And, you know, $90 is a lot to spend versus $2 a month over. What do you think, Laura?
I have my students use whatever they get, so I've been pretty
Mhm.
flexible about that. And it's been split up among 3 or 4 programs. I myself use Final Draft because I like it the best, but
Mhm.
I can use anything. So whatever we need to do, I'll do.
Yeah. It's worth I think we might want to do like a trial program and try it out. Mike, you teach intermediate. Mike gets a lot of kids on Writer Duet.
I'm trying to think. A lot of them have bought it by then. Not a lot, but I'd say like a third or half have bought Final Draft.
Hmm.
Like they actually purchased it by then because a lot of the intermediates are serious about what they're doing, and then the rest will do write or duet.
Hmm.
Or there was something else too they used. I can't remember.
Hmm.
what they're using, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's going to be interesting to talk about it and see what we decide to do. And I have Final Draft, I have Writer Duet, I have Fade In, but I personally like Writer Duet the best
That was the
uh,
one
as
fading.
a professional, and I think that it works really well. And thinking about it as a cloud-based system, I especially like because in the classroom, then I don't have to open a PDF. I can open the actual software. So when you're in a classroom, Josh, do you only open PDFs then?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's ironic because we thought PDFs were like the great thing, right? 15, 20 years ago when they first came out, and now they become this problem child.
Yeah, the crazy thing about so a lot of the PDFs that I have of like existing feature screenplays,
Hmm.
they they went right through. A lot of them went right through the accessibility thing
They did.
automatically.
Okay.
The ones that didn't really work for me were the ones that I have had for years that are
Yeah.
photocopied from real scripts.
Interesting.
And I
That would
love
make
those because it's
sense.
cool for students to see like a real copy of Chinatown or whatever.
Right. Right.
But there's really no way to make those accessible.
No, like Casablanca, I have that one. But what screenplays? Well, maybe you'll have to email me the ones that have worked for you because I'd like to see what those are.
Let me dig through
Right.
them. Yep.
I mean, I was looking at Begonia, Sinners, Weapons, and they didn't seem to be actually Begonia might have been digitally accessible. Have you had any luck with screenplay professional ones, Mike or Laura, that are automatically
I haven't done
digitally
it yet
accessible?
at all.
What?
So I've been using Get Out, Halloween, Children of Men,
Hmm. And are they
um,
digitally accessible
Everything
when you?
Everywhere All at Once. I'm sure some of those are. I don't know about Halloween. I mean,
Yeah, you sort of know when you put it onto your bright space. So
yeah.
we're gonna have to by next April, we have to have our bright spaces be like 100% digitally accessible. So anyway, okay, well, thank you all for showing up. And if you'd
Thank
like,
you.
I can email you the PowerPoint so you have those fun step
Yeah,
by step.
please. That'd be awesome.
Thank you all for coming today, and thank you, John, for your help. Good to see you, John.
Thanks, Juliet.
Okay,
Thanks,
thanks.
Juliet. Bye.
All right,
Bye.
bye-bye.